Charlie Brooker and Jessica Rhoades are executive producers on Black Mirror. Charlie, you also created, wrote, and showrun it. I'm Matt Nobler, Gold Derby. I wanted to start off by asking, are there any rules to Black Mirror?
That's a very good
Ooh,
question.
a great
Rules,
question.
I mean, I suppose the rules are, it's interesting. There's always a moment where when when I'm discussing an idea or kicking an idea around, there's a moment where you go, okay, that's what makes this Black Mirror. If you're sort of, there's often, and it's often a moment where either somebody is having a terrible time, or there's a sort of hopefully fairly delicious dilemma that's a sort of that's a collision between two um moods, or it's a sort of mind-bending position somebody finds themselves in. So it's not so much a rule so as a tone. And then generally the other, I mean generally also, if there's a rule, it's that, to sound ridiculous, it's that there are not really any rules. So that's the other thing, is to try and do um, something different each time, as much as possible. So it's so that's a fuzzy sort of set of half slash non rules I've outlined there.
Mm, yeah.
I don't know if that's an answer or just some sounds I've made.
No, that's an answer. Jessica, are, are there any rules for you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, there's one specific rule, which is even when you're not sure exactly why, Charlie's right. And I don't mean that, like, I mean that in a general sense. In every show, in every both episode of Black Mirror, but in any show you make, you have a group of talented people that you've brought together, and especially in Black Mirror, hoping each director makes it their own, and we try to give as much autonomy. But there's a moment usually on every episode where you're having a conversation, and to everyone in the room it seems like six and one half dozen of the other. It's not a big thing. It feels like it could go either way, and Charlie is so definitively knows it's red instead of blue or whatever it is. And to everyone else, there's a moment where you're all decided. And those are the moments I try to listen the most, because for whatever reason, the thing that makes this anthology work so distinctly again and again is Charlie's vision. And it's the true North Star. And if you have to really listen in those moments specifically, the big ones are easy. It's those little moments where, for whatever reason, his instinct is right.
Yeah. Jess, you wouldn't happen to have any blinds or curtains, would you? Just because the light's a little bit harsh.
Pull down the
If you can,
curtain.
like it, we can cut this. We can cut this bit out.
You'll have a continu You'll have to explain the
I'm just hoping there's
continuity.
enough
Yeah, yeah.
light right now.
There you go. You'll have to know that.
Oh, look
That's
at
like
that.
it never happened.
I'll leave and make some cuts so it makes sense.
Just in case anyone
London
thought
finally
they were
had sun.
hallucinating.
London
Yeah,
had
I'll
sun,
get it
and we wanted
now.
none of it.
Like, what is the most important thing to a Black Mirror episode?
That's
An
okay.
ending.
Again,
An ending.
yeah, an ending. Yes, it's often that's the other thing, is that often well, I'll be sort of saying, "Oh, I've got this idea," and so sometimes I'll be carrying an idea, the kernel of an idea for an episode around for almost literally years, and then it's when I kind of know what, in a way, the final image is. Once I know, if I can picture kind of the final shot, that's when I know I'm confident that I can proceed, if you see what I mean. So that's definitely up there, I would say. It's having that sort of it gives you a sort of North Star that you're staggering towards, basically. So yeah, that's a good answer. The ending. Yeah, that definitely needs an ending,
Mm.
I think. And I often work backwards from there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Jessica, this was your first year executive producing the show and coming into this Black Mirror world. What surprised you most?
It's a good question. I mean, I knew it all came from Charlie's mind, and so I love working with visionary showrunners. So that was less surprising to me than I think how the show is produced. So it's essentially, series 6 was, 5 pilots or 5 movies. And it really is that, because every director has their own crew, their own autonomy. The scripts are so different, and you really can't borrow any language from one episode to the next. Every episode you're restarting. Now we have a few like incredible creative partners that we can bring into each episode, but so there's shared behind the scenes lingo. But in terms of talking about the episode, every episode you're retoning it, you're all finding it together, and I think that makes it quite a marathon. You never really hit an easy part in the season. You only hit the hardest part in the season when they're all landing on each other.
Charlie, what surprised you most about Jessica coming into the show?
How lovely she is, I'm going to say. It's interesting because I suppose there's so Jessica has worked a lot, obviously, in the US, and so there's an interesting there's an optimism and an enthusiasm that seems natural to Americans, that is like, obviously us Brits are grumbling pessimistic cynics a lot of the time. So to have, and that's not to say that Jessica came in like sort of like Little Miss Sunshine, sort of like everything's fine. Do you know what I mean? But but so having that kind of, like, for want of a better phrase, daring do, sort of optimistic, can-do spirit, is something that is, so, a real shot in the arm for us Brits. So probably that, like, how much that sort of positivity, or sort of optimistic attitude, how far that actually gets you. So a late lesson in life for me to learn.
What's a lesson you've learned from Black Mirror, Jess?
Oh man. It's a really good
Nando's.
question. Nando's. I know Charlie introduced me to Nando's in post, and I was like, where have you been all my life? I want to start a franchise in the States.
For our States
Well,
viewers, that is a chicken chain in Britain and Australia.
Do you have it in Australia too?
Yeah, we've got Nando's here.
Reason enough. I mean, honestly, it's as much of a Black Mirror lesson as a filming in the UK. Black Mirror is a proper UK production, and the hours are different, much more, I would say, conducive to having a life. The crew goes home and sees their family for dinner, and coming out of years and years and years of conversations about what is sustainable and how to keep people safe, and something I've really cared about, looking at the US and kind of Canadian or North American hours. I think there's something to really learn from really sane, healthy balance. You can make work as brilliant as Black Mirror and genuinely have people go home in the evenings and see their family for the weekend.
Yeah. Now, Charlie, your background is in comedy and satire and cartoons, and like, how does your comedic sensibility inform how you approach Black Mirror?
Well, sometimes it's obvious. So, like in season 6, we did an episode, Joan is Awful, which is clearly a comedy, and sort of probably the most overtly comic episode we've ever done. Usually in the show, there's an element of Black comedy at the very least, or there's an element of satire going on. Quite often, I suppose, when I'm discussing the ideas to start with, or something that, when I'm intrigued by an idea, it's because something about it is funny to me, or could be. You could play it funny, you know what I mean. So even if you take an episode like Beyond the Sea from season 6, which has got which is not a comedy, which is a tragedy, but the core concept, you can imagine doing a sketch with that, something which is that there's a guy and there's two guys and their physical bodies in space, and they've got sort of, in a way, robotic kind of avatar lookalikes on Earth. You could get into some farcical situations with that, or you could, there's something comic about that. So quite often even if we play it very straight, or we're playing it for chills rather than laughs, where it's the spring, the wellspring that it's come from is has got some kind of high concept comic or satiric idea at the heart of it. I do think there's a lot of crossover clearly between horror and comedy. If you look, like, generally, you can see there's a lot of comedians are into horror or end up making horror shows, or sort of disturbing sort of dramas. And I think it might be, I'm not sure what it is. I think comedy, obviously your instinct is to elicit an emotional response from the viewer all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just that it's a very specific and very difficult one. When it's comedy, you're trying to make somebody laugh all the time. It's exhausting. And in some ways, drama is, I wouldn't say easier. It's different. You're working in a different register. But I guess that instinct, which is to, elicit an emotion from people, is the same. Yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah.
I wonder if there's also, like, with both, I think it's right what you said, but there's, like, also a suspense you're building up with horror and with comedy.
Yes.
Like, it's leading somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely rising pressure, release, and there's a sort of cadence to it, and there's a timing to it, which I guess is sort of instinctive. So no, it is really interesting that the number of sort of comedy people who also have a real affinity for horror. You only have to, people like Jordan Peele, or you can sort of see that.
I feel like it's also a very similar, in the edit, you also see it, because it's there. Horror and comedy live in that space for whatever reason. A smidge this way or a beat faster makes it funny or makes it scary, and the second before it just wasn't. There's something really, I think, interesting in the pacing.
I remember when we were doing the first ever season of Black Mirror, we were simultaneously doing a show that I did here in Britain called A Touch of Cloth, which was kind of like a Naked Gun airplane type show. Like it's a parody of detective shows, dark detective shows, played very straight, and it's like, again, gag packed, like Airplane was. And going from the set, we were literally shooting at the same time. I'd go from the set for A Touch of Cloth to the set of the National Anthem episode of Black Mirror. And it's interesting that the Black Mirror set was much more relaxed in many ways, partly because of the nature of what we were filming there. Everybody needed to laugh to sort of let off steam. Whereas on Touch of Cloth, we had to concentrate so much to make all the jokes land. So it's an interesting. It was interesting how one set was more relaxed, and not they were both really pleasant sets, but one set was more relaxed because, like, you have to focus so much on. I kind of feel like making a comedy is a bit like when you see people making a ship in a bottle or something like that. It's like this tiny, like, meticulous sort of thing. Whereas I think sometimes when you're doing drama, it's almost more about the vibes, for want of a better phrase. Do you know what I mean? There's still obviously massive attention to detail, but you can sort of pay more attention to big shapes in the narrative, I guess. I think. Sorry, I'm being incoherent. I'm trying to theorize on the fly.
No, that's good. Yeah. It's good. They're good thoughts, guys. I think, Charlie, just quickly, is there like what makes something funny to you?
You don't want to know. He finds everything funny.
I find all
that's
sorts
why
of
I asked.
funny.
I thought, I'm curious.
I do have a pretty grim sense of humor in many ways. I will laugh. I enjoy a sort of good laugh into the abyss, kind of thing. But also, I do like I was mentioning, sort of Airplane. I really like sort of goofy, unexpected sort of. When I'm doing, we do a show called Kunk on Earth as well, which is like a mock documentary, and that's again full of. It's a bit sort of ADHD level of jokes, if you see what I mean, like numb in terms of quantity. We try to switch on a joke hose and sort of just fill every second with something stupid, going on. So if you don't like one, there's another one coming along in 1 second. So a real variety. It's interesting working on the show, working on Black Mirror. You do again something like Joan. It was interesting to work with. That was directed by Ali Panku, who's also a sort of comic writer. She's sort of very experienced at in comedy, and like I say, that was we got a hell of a number of great sort of little cameos from all sorts of comic actors and stuff. It was interesting to play to do something that was so overtly comic within Black Mirror was a real thrill in many ways, and you're sort of like, oh, I could. It's interesting because each one is separate, and you say goodbye to all the characters generally at the end of each episode. Something a bit sad about that sometimes. You've sort of bothered to create this whole world, and then bye.
What I think. So you've mentioned 2 episodes, Charlie, that I did want to touch on, Joan is Awful and Beyond the Sea, and because they are such like different ends of the Black Mirror like world in terms of tones. I'm going to be a bit boring and just ask each of you, what was something special for you about each of those episodes? Jessica?
Well, I think for Joan, it was really special, not only that incredible team we were able to assemble, but it was really a firsthand view for me of Charlie's process, because we genuinely were about to prep another episode, and Charlie had been trying to work through an idea for quite some time, and he showed up one Monday morning and was like, I have it, and pitched Joan to me, and it was so clear we had to do it. There was no question that we needed that to be the next episode we shot, and that it wasn't an evergreen idea. A lot of Black Mirrors can kind of live forever, and they do, and but it needed to be made at that moment. We had no idea. Obviously, we were going to hit the strike, and and for actors, AI was going to become such a talking point. So, but the timing couldn't have been, more perfect. But I think that was a moment where Charlie was like, I'm going to go write it this weekend. And, and we were so nimble. We were able to be nimble. He's so fast when he, again, knows the ending. And that was, I just learned so much from the ability to just switch all the gears and make it happen.
Well, you think about Beyond the Sea. Charlie, do you want to say something that was special about Joan is Awful?
I think it was, well, again, it was working with Annie and Salma. It was so fun. I do remember early on we had because I'd written a version of the script because we didn't know, we knew we needed a sort of, the ambition was for a sort of A-list Hollywood actor to play Joan on one of the fictive levels. We didn't know that we'd get Salma Hayek, so I prepared a version of the script where it said Salma Hayek, and we had a Zoom. We sent it to Salma, and we had a Zoom call with her, and she got it. She'd got it immediately, and it was interesting in that on that Zoom call, she was kind of everything you would want Salma Hayek to be on a Zoom call. She was just sort of funny, outrageous, she's very sharp. She's just naturally funny. She's got a good sense of the ridiculous, and she's not afraid to take the piss out of herself. And that was the thing, because obviously in the original script, it wasn't like I was going in on, there's all sorts of things I thought she wouldn't want to say, and she was like, oh, her one note was can she sort of said, can my character sometimes be quite dumb? Can she be sort of, can she argue? Can she sort of, and then she even brought in sort of like, she ad-libs a line actually, which was a line that she sort of suggested, and she said something like, I'm a dyslexic talented actress with questionable English. She says at one point in the episode, which I wouldn't have dared to write something like that in a script and send it to an actor that you're really keen to work with. So it was really good. It was sort of dealing with all of, and then the fact that it's so sort of meta, it was quite a head wrecker in many ways throughout. But it was just such fun. It was just such fun.
Jessica, something special about Beyond the Sea?
Well, I think Beyond the Sea had the potential to be a really, I mean, kind of sci-fi leaning into the genre bits of it. And when John Crowley signed on to direct, it just settled it so much in the characters and the performances. And I feel like I learned so much from genuinely just also watching John work with actors, and the questions he asked were so definitively character based and nuanced. And I think you read a script like Beyond the Sea and you assume that the actors are going to need to, or kind of Aaron is going to need to do mannerisms of Josh and and that there's going to be kind of all this, I don't want to say gimmicky stuff, but gimmicky, that's how you're going to sell it. That's how you're going to make sure the audience knows when it's David. And John was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing like ticks or kind of, we're not going to do mannerisms. We're going to do this with character. You're not going to wonder when he is which character, because that's we'll feel it. And he was so, I mean, that's the brilliance of John, and obviously the cast we had there.
Yeah. Charlie?
I'd concur with that. I'd say that it was sort of, I think that when John came on, he's got a very sort of it's like a very gentle questioning curiosity sort of to him, and he'd ask me questions about, he was just very interested in, I remember he had almost a list of questions he wanted to ask about the characters in the script, and he'd ask them in a way. And I think sometimes my natural instinct is, on some level, I'm in trouble here. I haven't done my homework. I'm not sure that I know the answer to this. But he's genuinely, it's not like he's trying to catch you out. He's just genuinely curious. And what happened is, it meant that the Kate Mara's part sort of grew like quite a lot from that first the first draft that John will have read. We did quite a lot of work there, and so it was interesting, I think. And I've been fans of all the cast, and so getting to see them, there's obviously the scenes that like Josh and Auden Thornton, who plays his wife, have to do, that are extremely harrowing, where there's the sort of hippie cult gang, Manson style gang come in and sort of butcher the family. And then there's a sort of really just beautifully performed scene between like Kate and Aaron in the barn, where they're sort of discussing their marriage, and it's quite heartbreaking. So I think watching, do you know what I mean? All of that feels like proper grown-up drama. So it's sort of it's. I think it was those sort of moments. It was weird. We filmed it all in. Well, we filmed all the stuff at the farmhouse was actually in Britain. We found a place that looked like a very American-style farmhouse. We shot it at the height of a sort of unprecedented heat wave here in the UK, and so it was all quite heady.
What's the biggest hope or fear in one sentence that you have for technology?
Oh, the biggest hope
for technology.
Fear.
Yeah, for technology in the world.
I would say it's at one sentence. It would be that well, technology is an incredibly powerful tool. So I hope we can use it all to our advantage and not clumsily smack ourselves in the face with it. That's kind of one-ish. That's 1.5 sentences I've given you there.
That's sort of like, I feel like that's the lesson of Black Mirror. That Jessica,
because it's usually a neutral tool.
Yeah. Jessica.
Oh man, it's really hard to top that.
Yeah.
I think my hope is, I think technology has the opportunity to connect us. I mean, look at us here on Zoom, and I think we've seen that. And I think when technology connects us, it's at its best, and when it divides us, it's at its worst. And so I always look for moments of connection.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for spending some time talking today. All the best luck with the Emmy Awards, Charlie. You've won a few for Black Mirror in the past. Hopefully there can be some more coming your way.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
People can go to goldderby.com to follow the Emmy races. And this has been such a fun chat. Thanks so much.
Thank
So
you.
much fun. Thank you.
Cheers.